So let's talk a bit about the book, Ducati, a Photographic Tribute. Yeah, what was the genesis behind getting that started, that project?
Well, I'd always had in the back of my mind the idea that I'd like to do a book, like an actual photography book that happened to be about Ducatis. And a guy called Ashley Russell, who's a publisher, editor, who I know, suggested one day that, we should actually get together and do it.
So, I mean, how on earth do you go about choosing from your vast selection of photos? How did you do that?
It was a little difficult. As you can see, it's divided into three sections: road, race, and the rest. I basically went through all my archives and just dragged out shots, because obviously everything pre 2004 was on film, but I ended up with about 800 images.
It strikes me that when you look at the book, there's some stunning photographs of some of the older machines. Is there something about the older machines that holds our interest more than the newer ones, or is it just because they're rarer and perhaps more visually interesting?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of that. I guess I'm a man of my times, and the bevels were what always interested me most, so I tend to find them the more interesting. But I think also on the older bikes, you see more of the bike. There's little in the way of fairings enveloping everything and that sort of thing. So while you can make fairings look pretty beautiful, 916s and 1098s and Desmo Sedici RRs, you still can't beat having just beautifully formed engine cases and things like that. And the Italians, particularly in the 60s and 70s, I think were the absolute past masters of making beautiful looking engines.
And what about the contrast between road machines and the racing machines?
I suppose the racing machines are obviously interesting because they're racing machines. Ducati have obviously had not just the tendency, all their race bikes have basically been based on road bikes, or their road bikes have evolved from their race bikes. So there's always been that commonality between the two. In fact, when I was shooting the superbikes in 2009, it was a bit disappointing, really, because the race bikes were so close to the road bikes, but that visually there wasn't a lot to actually shoot that stood out. You might as well just have had a road bike in there. But certainly the earlier stuff, whether it's like the 100cc Grand Sport or some of the more exotic bikes these days, they've sort of got an aura about them.
The Ducati phenomenon has expanded around the world to such that there's now so many people who have a modern Ducati who have little connection with the past of the bikes, and they're always pleasantly surprised when they see some of the back catalogue, if you like, of the brand.
Yes, exactly. I had that in mind. As you say, a lot of the younger riders, or those getting into Ducatis just in the last 10 years or something, quite often, as you say, have no idea of where they came from.
Now, there's an entire section in your book, Phil, that's really devoted to other items unrelated to motorcycles that speak to the history of the company. In the shots, I sort of sense a special reverence that you've treated these other items. Is there some sort of reason for that?
I think it just goes back to that last point, that even if a lot of people do realise that Ducati's been making motorcycle bits since the late 40s, quite a vastly larger proportion don't realise that they started off as an electronics components company in 1926. So, there's quarter of a century of history before they even started looking at bikes. that sort of thing interests us. You can see just from the design perspective of some of their earlier things, whether it's the Giufono intercom, which is such a beautiful piece of Art Deco design, actually designed by Gio Ponti, a very famous designer and architect. He designed the Pirelli Tower in Milan, amongst many other things. The design's always been a very important part of Ducati industry, sort of thing. Whether it's that or the lovely little cameras they made, or whatever. The attention to design is not something that suddenly only started with like 916 or the 1098 or whatever. They've always had that side of things.
It's always been there, hasn't it?
Mm. And a lot of it's just so left field, like the first electronic shaver that ever produced in Italy, or as I said, they made big 8 and 16 millimeter movie projectors and all sorts of weird and wonderful things.
Do you, Phil, do you have a particular favourite or set of favourites that you particularly like in the book?
Oh, look, it's hard. There's so many. I guess one of the ones the couple that I do really like are the series on the 125 Sport motor, one of which was on the cover, and the Giufono shots, where in both cases I was able to get the motor or the intercom sort of into a studio situation and just spend the time to get the lighting right.
We all like our Ducatis and we often take photos of them. Are there any tips that a professional like yourself can give to the amateurs about how to take better photos of their motorcycles?
Be aware of the light. Have some idea of what you're trying to show on the bike. If you can, with an SLR with a decent size sensor in it these days, try and isolate the bike from the background. So use a longer focal length, shoot as wide open as you can while still having enough depth of field to get what you want to get in focus. Nothing worse. It's fairly useless trying to, if you're talking about shooting a whole bike or something like that, try to do it with a point and shoot with which is going to have a small sensor and a humongous depth of field. So, everything from 2 feet in front of the lens to the mountains and in the background is going to be in focus. Well, it's hard to isolate the bike and put your attention to the bike with that sort of gear. Not saying it can't be done, but it's not easy.
So good gear's always better.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. So, well, thank you very much, Phil, for sharing with us your excellent work, and I'm sure many people will look forward to getting their own copy.
No worries. Thanks for the interest. Greatly appreciated.